You're no longer wandering exiles. This kingdom of faith is now your home country. You're no longer strangers or outsiders. You belong here, with as much right to the name Christian as anyone. God is building a home. He's using all of us, irrespective of how we got here and what He is building. He used the apostles and prophets for the foundation. Now He's using you, fitting you in brick by brick, stone by stone, with Christ Jesus as the cornerstone that holds all the parts together. We see it taking shape day after day, a holy temple built by God. All of us built into it, a temple in which God is quite at home.
You know, as I think about just the last 12 years, just what God has done in our church and just a miracle. I mean, how we started with a miracle. Not only that we started with a miracle, but we look at just God's love for His house. Mm-hmm. And I think about just how Tracy and I came together when I first saw her and met her. I just saw she had a real heart for God, and I saw that, and it's a miracle that we came together. And then our journey, and then part of our journey, and just coming to this place, because really we never thought we'd ever be pastors or have our own place. I told her, if I ever have a church, I'll preach in Levi's and I'll do this, and I'm not going to be the typical. But our heart was, man, we as we started growing older and stuff, and just thinking, man, I thought, well, I'm going to be an evangelist, and people always say, no, you're a pastor, and my wife goes, you're more of a pastor. And then just that moment when, really Pastor Jacob, Pastor Jim kind of shared with me, and it was funny because she never heard me share with her how she found out we were coming to Jennings, and my family actually found out we were coming to Jennings. Pastor Jacob was so excited, he didn't even give me time to share with Tracy, what God was speaking.
We found out via service.
That's right. It was a Sunday morning service, and that's how my wife found out. And then her big word was like, all right, that's good, Pastor Jacob. It's good, Pastor Jim, but do you have a word?
Exactly. But even though you always thought you might not be a pastor, I always felt, that you were going to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. But it's funny, even though you have that call, because I felt that call also, but when it actually comes down to it, you go kicking and screaming, and especially, at the time we had 4 children. And I think if it was just you and I could have gone, hey, let's go, let's pack up this little town, oh well. But when you hear your kids cry and about leaving their friends, and you think as the mom, I got to change doctors, I got to get new friends, will I be accepted there? You think of all those sacrifices. And even when we first went and started the church, all the church could pay us was $1,000 a month, and Pastor Jacob paid us $1,000. He's like, if you want any more, you got to raise the rest. And and I had to constantly go back to remind myself that when Jesus called the disciples, it was a sacrifice. They had to lay down their nets. They had to lay down, he said, unless you leave father, mother, and all that behind, unless you die to yourself, you'll never find life. And so many of you people may look at us and think, oh, it's great, you have this church, and they're really doing things in the city, but you don't know the sacrifices and the cries from your children and the things that we left behind to come here. It was very difficult, and many days I was crying and screaming at God, not literally, but in my mind, and yet God would always remind me of the call on our life. And the funny thing, even as a little girl, I always had a heart for the poor. And when we first moved here, I'm like, why did God call us to this little town? But more and more I realized this is a very poor town, and that's the heart that God always gave me, was to reach out to the poor. And so the call is great, but the sacrifices are worth it.
Yeah. I think the most vivid memory that I have is one, when Pastor Jacob stood up and he told everybody in front of the church that we were going to Jennings. And at the time, nobody knew, and I remember our family gathering up in the living room after that Sunday morning.
What a moment.
Everybody's crying. Oh no, we're getting sent out. And it was a big deal because for me, I remember being a freshman at the time, being in the middle of high school, you're finally making friends and stuff like that, and we end up moving. But in the midst of all that time, we had been driving back and forth. But I remember everybody's attitude in the beginning at first was just, man, we don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. Out of all places, why are we going to Jennings? But the thing that I noticed over the years is, as my parents were faithful and you saw their faithfulness, even though attitudes in the very beginning kind of was shaky, the faithfulness and the foundation of saying, even my dad at times saying, what, when we're going, let's just go back. It'd be easier just to go back. Let's fall back on this, and seeing that faithfulness ultimately in the end, even for me, is what created something inside my own heart that gave me a heart for the house and that gave me a heart for this city, to see the faithfulness and saying, look, even in the hard times, we're not backing out. We're sticking in with this.
I know that every time we got in God's presence, God just confirmed what he called us to do, is to build his house, really build his kingdom here in this region.
I know that over the last 12 years, it's been the hardest season of my life, but I can honestly say I have grown the most.
Yep.
I've known the Lord 38 years, but I have grown the most and changed the most in the last 12 years than I've ever changed in my entire Christian life.
I think when we talk about the heart for the house, we have to begin with a foundation before we talk about anything else. And the thing that I've absolutely loved about this house is we are so passionate about everything beginning with Christ. It's been the heartbeat of this house from day one, is we just have an ultimate desire to see people meet Jesus. And I think the great thing about that is you can be flawed and stand up and talk about the greatness of God, because you're not pointing people to yourself, you're pointing people to Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's been, for us, we can be filled with mistakes and flaws and yet make much of Christ.
It makes me remember when you first came here, Josh, and just you lived in that house out in the country past Welsh.
Let's not
and when the
bring that
wind,
up.
there was no foundation there.
There was not.
And it's like when the wind would blow, the whole house would rock, because it's like on these big pillars, things. And I remember you knock on the door, other people in the church, and go, "Can I stay here?" Because you needed.
Stayed at Jamie's house.
Yeah.
all the time.
Or you come to the church and there was chairs pushed together with a pillow. And you're like, man, who slept in the church last night?
But it's a great picture of
my hard knocks.
But it's a great picture of like, man, I need to be at a place where there's the foundation
That's
and rock
exactly right.
solid.
Yeah.
It's never about the buildings we build, even though there'll be buildings ahead.
Yeah.
But it's about putting the right foundation in people's lives so they can build on Christ.
For our house, we only have one strength, and that's Christ. We have no other strength.
Yeah.
We the lights and the buildings and the stuff that we have is nothing without Jesus. And we talk about that every week, for our weekend worship experiences, that we want, if anything, we want people to meet Jesus. We want the eyes of people's hearts to be open to see Christ, because when people see Jesus, their lives change.
When I first came here, I was raised up in rules and regulations. And I remember even in this building when it was just a warehouse, I went up to Pastor Bubba one time and I said, man, all my life you told me, all my life I've been told what I can't do. I said, it's the first place I've ever been where somebody's actually told me what I can do.
Yeah.
And so what happened for me was I went from rules to relationship.
Yeah.
And that's when I actually connected with Christ after being here for a little while. And so it changed my life, and it's a very special thing. And now I understand the power of having a relationship with Jesus.
I think when we first started the church, we felt like we had to tell people everything to do. And the shift that I've seen over the last 12 years is that now a lot of times when people come to me, and ask, what do I do in this situation? I tell them, you pray, you ask God, where I used to say, do this, do that, do this, follow these steps. And what we've learned over the last 12 years is always pointing back to Jesus. Well, what is God telling you to do in that situation? What is Jesus speaking to you? That's what you need to hear, and that's how you're going to grow. Not me telling you what to do, but you building that relationship and hearing from God yourself.
being a part of a family is something that I think that everybody really longs to be a part of. And I remember growing up, I had a family that I really enjoyed being part of. But at the same time, going to school and making friends, there was always friends that I had that I knew that had certain homes and certain families that their house was not a place that they enjoyed to go home to.
Yeah.
And so I think the thing that I've noticed about our church, and this has been since the very beginning, within Fuel, within all of our ministries, with even in OSC Kids. I mean, I love hearing kids coming out on Sundays and saying, I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And it's been the same thing for Fuel. We've always had been notorious of attracting kids that have not had a secure family or a secure home. And it's some place, our church has become a place where people see it as a genuine family, a genuine home, where it's not just a place where they come and occupy a seat for an hour or something like that, but it genuinely becomes a place where people care about them, we know them by name. And I think that really does speak volumes of our church and the relationships and the emphasis that we put on spiritual family.
It's not always fun in a family. A family is full of love. It's great. But you think of the time you have to spank your children. There's fits and tantrums on the floor. And we don't like to deal with that, but we have to. That's part of love.
Yeah.
And I've seen people come to the church and like, I don't like it when you tell me what's wrong in my life. But if we didn't take that 3-year-old and say, you know what, it's wrong to bite your sister.
Right.
You know, how would that child become?
Yeah.
You know, and we have to go through that process sometimes. That's all a part of the family. It's not just, oh, I love you, you're awesome, you're great. But let me tell you some things in your life. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about this family.
Well, I think over the past 12 years, we've had the opportunity to see different generations come through our church.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, we had a conversation about this maybe a few months ago, is with all of our Fuel students from 12 years ago when we first started Fuel and they started coming, the ones that are still here and the ones that are actively serving and have an active relationship with Jesus are the ones that we took the time to invest into. Yeah. And you see that importance of growing with others.
It's a joy to serve in the house. It's a joy to serve outside of the house. And I think that's what we do well as a church is we serve in the house and we have a healthy dose of serving outside the house. Mm-hmm. And it stretches. It's one thing to serve in the house. You can get comfortable in that. But when you go outside, it stretches you. I know when we did the last block party, it was a stretch for us to go out on Sundays, knock on doors, and invite people to come to a block party. I was nervous as all get out. And I realized that I'd become almost inward in a sense because I for a while, I just served in the house.
What I love about our church is there's a place for everyone to serve, because a lot of times, you think, well, I can't sing, I can't teach, I can't preach, but the truth is everybody has something to give. And, we've seen that so evidenced this last month, since my husband's surgery, just different people bringing food, cards, a call, a bouquet of candy, just whatever it could be. Our ladies calling to offer to clean the house, and how everyone has a place to serve. It doesn't matter if it's just sewing a curtain for the front of the church or bringing a meal or helping with the little kids. There's something for everyone to do. A part of the body of Christ, every single part is needed. And if anybody in here has ever lost a limb or a part of your body, you know how much you miss that.
Well, even the thing that I remember going back to the hurricane, that was something that our church stepped up to the plate to serve on, and it wasn't even something that was expected.
It wasn't planned. No.
It wasn't like it was, we have an activity going on in the church and we're promoting it and announcing it and saying, hey, we need volunteers.
Just a need came up.
Just to see our church rise to the occasion and say, this is what we do. This is what we are. We serve. And, you saw that with the hurricane. We had lines.
You had a 2-mile line.
Lines.
Walmart ran out of toilet paper, so people had the runs over here.
I remember we were serving in Mississippi.
Yeah.
When we were told it was coming, the next one was coming here. Yeah, we had to book it back over here, board the windows up, and pack
we were there 3
weeks.
weeks. Yep. It was almost like God trained us to prepare us for what we were going to meet here. And the thing that blessed me is when we remember, like the summer after that, we found out there were still houses
Correct, yeah.
that needed repair. We did that 2 summers, and the cool thing is we had the Catholic Church come the second summer, found out what we did the first summer, and they partnered with us, and so we were able to finish some of these houses and stuff like that, and it was really neat. I remember that one lady could barely breathe, and
Yep.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
she never. And the thing is, she never had a hot water heater. And when someone found that out, they went and bought the hot water heater.
For all of us at the table, I mean, we all started, that's where we all began.
Yeah.
None of us got paid to do this. You know, we all started with just a heart to say, God, if you've done this for me, then I'm going to do this for people. And I mean, when I was 18, helping, we load the 15-passenger van and load that up and do all that, to traveling to Eunice every weekend when we started all that. You know, and then I look now at people who week in and week out, you know, from our worship teams who come every Sunday, to people in our kids department, to people who do stuff outside of the church that come into the offices. It's just people laying down their lives for the gospel, laying down their lives for each other. And the thing that I love the most about it, though, is that we are encouraging our children to do that. We're starting early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we got bands, you know, of people on our worship team who are young, and people come in here and see all these young people on the stage, and we're no respecter of persons, no respecter of age either.
Yeah.
You know, if you can do something at a young age, we're gonna
Do
get
it.
you in there.
Go for
We're
it.
gonna go.
Sure.
And I love that for my kids. You know, they need to
Right.
they need to see that one. They need to see that model. But then I think there's this fallacy that we've bought into as a church as a whole, where like one day you'll be the church, and one day you're going to be a part of something big, and one day, and that's just not the truth. They are the church now. Our students are the church. Our kids are the church now.
Well, if you ever notice, the people in our church that serve are the ones that begin to really recognize that it's not about them,
Yeah,
that it's about Jesus.
that's where it starts. Yeah,
That's where it all starts. And you notice the people that serve are the ones that God really begins to do something in their heart. He's after their motivations, why we do what we do. Yeah.
And I love it even when, you know, people bring their kids when we have a work day, and you see little kids out there with the broom and a paintbrush too, because a lot of times you hear mamas making excuses. Well, I can't come and pass out that food. I can't come and help with the work day because I have kids. Well, bring them. I love how our church, you know, a lot of people just bring them with, so they can see that. It's good for them to see us passing out water bottles, and they can help with that too, you know, and they can help. I remember even just building this building, how it wasn't just all hired out. It was people in our church.
Absolutely.
And I remember one day with my own kids, we were all out there pushing brooms, and they loved it. You know, they were holding the dustpan and being a part.
Yeah, I remember thinking that ministry started whenever you got a title.
Or you got a certain age.
Yeah,
or
I remember thinking, you know, whenever I become a pastor, then my ministry is going to start.
Yeah.
wow.
You know, even going to Eunice, you know, we were there. I mean, countless hours, tearing it down, rebuilding it, building it how we had a vision to build it, and the whole time thinking, you know, man, one day my ministry's going to start. Not knowing that the whole time
It
I'm
already
doing
started.
my ministry. I mean, this is what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
it
and,
already started.
and it's fun, and honestly, it's fulfilling.
The thing that I love about this church is that we're not just focused on the four walls.
Yeah.
That we really do. We have a genuine heart for the city. We want to see God do things in Paradise Park and in our schools and Lake Arthur and in all throughout surrounding areas. And we've always had that heart. And I think as we continue to do that, not only are we going to begin to see God do things in this house, but we can begin to see God really do things in our city through this church, with the people in this church.
Also in us. I mean, for me, it's anytime I've ever taken the time to either go out and serve somebody or to spend time and disciple somebody, I've told them, I said, you don't realize this, but I'm learning more than you are.
Yeah.
Right.
God's moving in me more than he is in you.
Yeah.
And that, it blows me away, because you think, you know, I'm supposed to be discipling somebody. I'm the man. I'm helping them. And at the same time, God's doing something in me.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing I think about is that as long as we have a heart for Jesus, we'll never stop growing. And, you know, the thing I think about is, you know, especially if people are sitting in church this Sunday and they see an empty chair, that chair is for someone to come.
Mhm.
I believe our greatest days are ahead of us.
Yeah.
I believe that, you know, as Tracy shared earlier, as it gets darker in our time, the brighter the light.
Yeah.
And how much greater can we have an expectation that God's going to do something greater than ever before. So even as as you are out there today in the audience, I just want you to know this. There's a heart for you. There's a desire for you to grow. There's a desire for you to experience God's wonderful presence, God's wonderful grace, His forgiveness, His power, but that you would walk in a family that would love you and be concerned about. We can't pick the family we're born into, but we can pick the family that we walk